Hello, my friends and fellow travelers. My name is Pierce. This is my channel, Tales from the Road. Thanks so much for stopping by. Today, we're talking about an Italian city that's near and dear to my heart. It's the industrial capital of the country, the city with the big lights and the big money. It's the fashion capital of this Mediterranean nation. Of course, I'm talking about the beautiful city of Milan. It's a city that I actually studied in, I got my master's degree in, and in this video, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know before you go so that you can have this amazing Italian experience in a city that people sometimes sleep on, but shouldn't. So, let's get into the content. Andiamo, ragazzi. So before we get into the practical information, let me tell you a little bit about where Milan is located and a little bit about its history and why it's so important. Geographically speaking, Milan is in the north part of Italy. It's very close to the Alps, it's very close to, I would say, the French Riviera, and it's not too far from other major Italian cities like Florence, like Venice, and like Rome. Milan is in the region called Lombardia, and Lombardia is actually the industrial and financial heartland of Italy. It's the powerhouse of the economy of the Italian national state today, and it's actually one of the richest regions of Europe, bar none. Historically speaking, Milan has, of course, a very long history. When you go to the city, you'll see a lot of different historical, architectural context and different things like that. So you've got nice Renaissance castles, you've got different districts that were built during the Italian imperial times, and then, of course, you have this super modern lens of the economic powerhouse of Europe that is Milan today. While Milan is not necessarily one or two on the tourism hierarchy of Italian cities, it is a beautiful place that should definitely not be slept on. And let me tell you a little bit about why it's so special in the practical section. Visas. So first off, getting to Milan. Americans are visa-free entrance into Italy and can stay up to 90 days. But remember that Italy is in the Schengen zone, so if you spend time in Germany, that reduces the amount of time that you can spend in Italy. But if you're planning a 1 week, 2 week trip to Italy, really nothing to worry about. Money. In Italy, we use the euro, and the euro right now is trading at about 0.91 euros equal $1. So everything is marginally more expensive in Europe with regards to numbers than it is in the United States. With regards to how expensive Milan is in comparison to other Italian cities, I would say that Milan is actually a bit more expensive than everywhere else because this is the economic and financial hub of the country. Many people from all over Italy and all over Europe come to Milan to find jobs, which means that apartments and housing, and specifically like hotels, are much more expensive in Milan than they are in the rest of Italy. There is a large amount of tourism in Milan, so that also jacks up the prices. And the food costs, I've noticed in comparison to most of Italy, is definitely higher in Milan as well. Although if you're coming from New York City, Los Angeles, Miami, Milan is definitely cheaper than those cities. You can probably plan on spending for a low-end hotel around 100 euros per night, per meal, something like 25 euros per meal, and if you're taking public transportation, something like 8 or 10 euros for a day pass. So now let's talk about transportation in Milan, especially getting in and out of the city. The transportation in Milan has a lot of options because number one, they have a massive airport which is called Milano Malpensa. Malpensa has the international flights, so if you're coming directly from the United States, you'll most likely fly into Malpensa, connecting either probably in London, Amsterdam, Paris, or finding a direct flight directly into Milan. For regional travel, if you're coming from Europe, Milan also has two other airports, one called Linate, one called Bergamo. The only issue for Milan is that the airports are very far away from the city center, so you need to know that it's going to take time for you to get from the airport into the city center, and it's always good to budget because Milan has a lot of traffic, especially if you're leaving back home on a flight. The good news is that you can go to the Milan Central Station and you can take the Malpensa Express for about 20 euros, and that can get you to the airport in about 30 minutes, because if you take a bus or a taxi, it's well over an hour, because the airport really isn't close. If you're flying a Ryanair out of Bergamo, it is very far from Milan. It's probably the same distance as Malpensa, and again, if you're taking a bus, it's going to take you at least a good hour and 15 minutes to get to the airport, and the bad part about Bergamo is that there are no trains, unless you go to the city of Bergamo and then take a taxi to the airport. However, once you're in Milan, getting around the city is actually really easy because the city has a really good interconnected metro and tram system, as well as buses, which can get you to any point in Milan within 20 or 30 minutes, because the city itself is actually not that big. Right now, a single ride on the Milan Metro is around 2 euros. I think it's the same for the buses. And the good news is that you don't even need to buy tickets anymore. You can just tap into the Metro or onto the buses using your credit card, which I think is a really, really good idea. The one thing to note about Milan and Italy in general is that taxis here are very, very expensive for the distance that you're going. So if you have the money to budget taxis into your trip, you'll probably also be sitting in traffic because Milan does have a lot of traffic, and you'll also be paying a premium of 25 to 50 euros for a distance that's actually not very far. So the public transportation is a pretty good deal. The taxis are a pretty bad deal. It's going to depend how you want to travel when you're there, of course. Safety. Honestly, I would say Milan goes with the rest of any large European city where you just need to be aware of where your bag is so you don't get pickpocketed. The attenzione pickpocket thing actually is a big thing in Milan, and the last time I was there I even saw people arguing that someone was getting pickpocketed. And I will say, having lived in Milan, it is the only city I've ever lived in where someone has actively tried to pickpocket me. It happens, you just have to be aware. That would be the only dangerous thing. You wouldn't end up in a part of Milan that's necessarily dangerous if you're just touring through it, but just know that as you probably looked like a tourist, Italians are very good at telling who's Italian and who's not Italian. Just make sure to know where your bags are, know where your wallet is, and your camera, of course, as well. So let's talk about the awesome food options you have in Milan. Milan is cool because it has all of the immigrants from all over Italy that came to Milan specifically for work. So if you want to try regional Italian food, Milan is probably the best city to do that because you can find Apulian food, you can find Sicilian food, you can find Tuscan food, you can find Roman food. You can find it all in Milan. It's great. If you want to try something super Milanese, there's two things that you should really try. Number one is costoletta alla Milanese, and this is basically like a Wiener Schnitzel, a fried piece of pork or veal, served with some potatoes. Very popular in Milan, always very delicious. Number two would be risotto alla Milanese, which is a yellow risotto spiced with saffron that's also fantastic. Number three is you can try some panzerotti. Panzerotti are like fried pizza pockets, kind of like a calzone but fried. There's a place called Luini in the center of Milan that is like a staple for finding that. But the good news for Milan is that they have restaurants from all over the world because this is the international heartland of Italy. So if you want to try something Italian, not Italian, or anything in between, Milan has got you. What I will say, and this goes back to price, is that Milan can be a pretty big ripoff depending on where you eat in the city, because there's the tourist center that people go to. This is an area called Brera, which is a very beautiful part of the city, as well as any area by the Duomo, which is the largest cathedral, I guess one of the largest cathedrals in the world, and one of the certain highlights that you will definitely go to when you visit Milan. This means that anything by the Duomo, specifically restaurants, are probably way more expensive than what you would find in the rest of Milan, but if the price doesn't matter to you, enjoy the beautiful Italian food. So to finish up the video, I'm going to tell you some of the things that I love to do in Milan, things that I would recommend having done. I go back to Milan maybe 3 or 4 times a year because I have friends there and I live in Italy right now, and these are the things that I still love to do when I go in the city. So number one, there's an area called Navili. Navili is an old canal district where they have restaurants, they have bars, they have clubs. It's a really nice place to go and spend an evening, walk around during the day, and it's always very busy, very vibrant. It's in an area called Porta Genova, which is known for having some of the best restaurants. It's also very close to major art museums like Mudec and other things like that. There's always stuff to do in this part of the city, so I would definitely budget an evening to go check it out, to go sit along the canals and have an Aperol Spritz. One of the great things to do in Milan that many locals enjoy and that many foreigners are confused about is the aperitivo. An aperitivo is a drink that you normally have around 6 p.m. because Italians typically have dinner later around 8 p.m. At 6 p.m., you can get a drink, normally 6 euros, 7 euros, 8 euros. You can get an Aperol Spritz, a Campari Spritz, maybe even a Negroni if you're feeling a little bit saucy. And with that, you're gonna get a plate of various appetizers, finger foods, whatever it is, maybe some chips, maybe some focaccia, maybe little pieces of pizza. I mean, it really depends on the place. Some places are very generous, some places are less generous. Before COVID, they actually had buffets where you could buy one drink and then you get an entire buffet of stuff. That was great. I'm not really sure if those exist anymore, but regardless, take advantage of the aperitivo. In Milan, where the dinner prices are quite high, you might as well go get a drink and dinner and maybe a second drink instead of just having food. My opinion, but definitely something I'd recommend. Secondarily, there's the traditional Milan, which I would definitely recommend. You can find many different old churches all over the place, but the number one, I think, highlight is, of course, the Duomo. And right next to it is one of the most impressive Renaissance-era museums. So definitely anything in the Duomo area, in the Brera area with the beautiful old buildings, I definitely recommend. There's also Castello Sforzesco, which is basically a Renaissance-era castle. that you can also go tour. It's a really cool place to explore the ancient side of Milan in a city that's otherwise changing at like rapid speed. Milan for me is much more of a vibe city and a modern city than it is a tourist city. When you go to Florence, when you go to Rome, there's going to be all these things that you need to knock off, to see. In Milan, it's not really like that. When you do the center, you see the Duomo, you've kind of done half of it. You go to Navili, you've done another good chunk of it. I think the Chinatown in Milan is really good if you want to eat really local Chinese food. They have a very big and robust population. They also have a lot of new buildings in Milan. There's an area called Porto Garibaldi where they've built this huge sort of like financial center with new skyscrapers and sort of like the modern face of what Italy could be. They also have some very interesting skyscrapers that they built maybe 10 years ago called the Bosco Verticale, which are these skyscrapers that basically have a forest on top of it. Also very interesting. Each part of Milan has its own sort of idea, its own sort of vibe. Really cool restaurants and cafes no matter where you are. And then so many cool things like pop-up events, like Fashion Week related like things, lots of great shopping. Basically every company that sells clothing has a shop in Milan that you can go tour. They have really interesting factory tours for different products, whether it's Fernet Branca, which is a local Italian alcohol, to local breweries, Lambrate, to the south of the city where you can check out the sort of fashion industry stores like from Louis Vuitton, from Prada, from Gucci. I know Louis Vuitton is French, but all the other Italian companies as well have a presence in Milan. What I'm saying is Milan is not your typical tourist city. It's not a city with just like you need to do this, and this, and then you can check it off. It's a city with a lot to discover, a lot underneath the surface, and you can of course go to the Duomo, you can of course go to La Scala, the most famous opera house in Italy, or you could do none of it and you could just go to restaurants and see the best of Italian food and cuisine, and you can go do as much modern things as you want. You could go see AC Milano, the famous soccer team, play Inter Milan, the other famous soccer team. Everything that Italy has is in Milan. That's the point. On a last note, some good day trips that you could take from Milan is you could go to Lake Como, very close. I think it's like an hour and a half away. You can go to Lake Garda. There's the lake region to the north towards Switzerland that's very beautiful, very close to Milan. You could, of course, go to Lugano, which is a Swiss city, also not very far. You could get there by train. It's in the Alps, very beautiful. And then the good news about Milan is from Milano Centrale, which is the hub station. It's actually a very beautiful station that was built during the imperial times. It's so ridiculous looking, like so over the top. From that station, you can go legitimately everywhere in Italy with some sort of speed train, a Frecciarossa and Italo, which are the two speed train companies, or you take regional trains to all kinds of different cities. So there's a lot of things you can do within 2 hours, within 3 hours. And of course, it's a great place to start and stop your Italian trip because it has one of the biggest airports in the country. So that being said, I think Milan has a lot to offer. It's a great city for many reasons. It's an up-and-coming industrial version of modern Europe, and it's a place with friends that I love. So I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any other questions, feel free to drop some stuff in the comments below. And I think that's going to do it for me. If you want to check out another travel guide for Italy, I definitely have some for you. If you want to check out other travel guides from around the world and you're curious about the world and exploring the world with me through my travel guides, we can do that together, my friends. I hope you all have a beautiful day, stay blessed, and arrivederci.